Well, I was thinking, like many of you, a few months ago, I got a call from Juan Ignacio letting me know about a new volunteer role he was taking on with Universidad Metropolitana and asking for partnership and support. So it was a wonderful catch up, and here we are many months later, and we're really impressed by all of you in the room, the work that we've been doing together. So as Juan said, I'm Amanda Nelson. I'm a vice president with Core Group. We've been partnering with Universidad Metropolitana in a number of ways. And my colleague here, Craig Shelley, is a managing director at Core Group. And we wanted to tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing with the university, talk about some of the successes, and then some ideas for the future that we'd love to talk to all of you about. So first, Craig, why don't you tell us a little bit about your focus at Core Group and a little bit more broadly about what we do at Core Group?
Sure. Yeah. Good afternoon. Happy to be here with all of you, and appreciate you tolerating our lack of ability to speak Spanish. So thanks for that. I appreciate the courtesy. But yeah, so I mean, I'm very lucky. I get to do something that's really, really fun for a living. I get to work with ambitious leaders who want to do really cool things with their organizations and help them get to the next level. Unimet definitely falls into that category, and we're excited to be part of the team. But really, it runs a spectrum, right? So that's everything from working with, let's say, the Obama Foundation, taking them from a very political oriented fundraising operation to a philanthropic operation. That's working with Kaboom, the folks that build playgrounds. You may have seen them on Parks and Rec some years back, but helping them design a strategy and then fund that strategy to end place-based inequity across communities across the United States. And it also involves a lot of work with higher ed institutions, right? So that's Pace University, Queens College up in New York, Paul Smith's College in upstate New York, helping those organizations really transform their fundraising and bring it to a next level. And all of those things kind of inform the work that we've been able to do with Juan and the team. It's, how do you look at an organization that hasn't had a long track record of fundraising, but certainly has these deep ambitions for where it's going? That's going to require a lot more capital than you have now. So it's been a lot of fun to work with the team and sort of build out a strategy that, to be honest with you, when we started, would have said that something like what you all have been doing today was not even in the realm of something that we would consider, right? So this is just kind of a waypoint along the way to where we want to go as an organization. But it's a pretty big moment to be able to say we get this many people to come together under the university's banner to talk about life, business, future, the university itself. It's pretty exciting.
So we've been working to build a culture of philanthropy. We've been working to tropicalize some best practices for American universities, as we have been very affectionate about calling it. And really thinking broadly about a fundraising and alumni engagement strategy, building a roadmap, making some specific recommendations around philanthropic priorities and opportunities to build even further. And I want to highlight some of those successes and absolutely the partnership with Juan and Luis Miguel and many of you that we've had the opportunity to connect with. But first, Craig, I think it'd be helpful after this wonderful history of philanthropy to hear a bit more about trends that we're seeing in higher ed and philanthropy in general.
Yeah, I'd say, there's really kind of 5 main trends that I've been thinking a lot about and seeing. I think like most trends that we've all experienced, they've been accelerated by the pandemic, right? Anything that was kind of happening before is happening a lot more quickly now. But if you think in terms of these 5 categories, it probably gets most of what's happening in the field. First is people are giving larger gifts to fewer organizations. So like at the extreme, you have people like Mackenzie Scott that was highlighted before, but really even, everyday philanthropists, of which I throw myself in that category, right? You're starting to think more deeply about what you care about. And rather than sort of spread lots of gifts across, a number of organizations, you're picking the 1, 2, 3 things that really matter to you, and you're giving larger gifts there. So that's a huge trend for sure. That trend is definitely fueling a trend in higher ed, particularly around campaigns. We're seeing people go out to the market and try and fuel their ambitions at levels we've never seen before, right? When I started my career, 20-something years ago, you could name the number of billion-dollar campaigns that were out there. You can't do that anymore. I mean, it's organizations, again, particularly in higher ed, you've barely heard of are out there raising $1 billion. So that's definitely happening. One of the things that's fueling that is the other trend is really planned giving, right? So I've heard throughout my career, the greatest wealth transfer in history is going to happen between generations, and you need to capture that for your organization. It's finally actually happening. I think there's been a few things that have punted it. Some economic crises here and there, have sort of slowed that at different times. People have lived longer than people expected, but that wealth transfer is finally happening. And you're actually seeing donors do really interesting things, for lack of a better term, financial engineering gifts, right? They're sort of going out, doing really interesting things with life insurance, doing interesting things with their estates, and giving these incredibly large gifts. I apologize. I've in the last 2 years not done a lot of standing in front of a room speaking, so apparently my voice is not ready for it. The other thing we're seeing is donors are collaborating, right? They're coming together more and saying like, hey, why don't we together pick what we're going to fund, because we can have a greater impact that way. You'll see a lot of the philanthropists that we were looking at earlier, they often went in alone, right? The Rockefellers went out and said, this is what we're going to do. You're not seeing that generation today do that. I mean, for all the money that the Gates Foundation puts out, they put a sizable amount of money into trying to build the field of philanthropy and trying to get donors to collaborate. And again, that sort of trend is proliferating throughout the sector. And then I'd say, the last thing I'd say is something that we call trust-based philanthropy. You're seeing donors trust the organizations they give money to more than they ever have before. I think historically, donors have tended to want to keep a tight control when they gave money. There was an inherent distrust, for lack of a better term, in the leader of institutions and organizations. Maybe some of that was founded, maybe some of it wasn't. But donors have gotten to the point where they're starting to respect, understand, and partner with the leaders of organizations in a way that they haven't before. And that's allowing them to trust those organizations to take the funds and put them to the greatest use. So Amanda, I'd sort of flip it back to Unimet and say, as we're seeing these trends kind of at a macro level, on a micro level, what have we all been working on?
I think those are all aspirational areas that we've been building foundations towards. I think with donor collaboratives, for example, we've been seeing a lot of international support. That's absolutely an opportunity for Unimet, but there were a few things that Luis Miguel and Juan in particular needed to prioritize in order to have those future conversations and to be frank, have conversations with many of you in the room here today. So I think the first really important milestone was establishing a US-based 501c3. So that's here in the United States, and this was a monumental effort that the Unimet team undertook. But now that allows for transparency and accountability with funds that are coming to the university to support scholarships, research funds, to support much of the important work to maintain and grow academic integrity of the institution. So I cannot tell you how important that is for US-based donors as well. Now, if you're here in the United States and you make a donation to Unimet, you can get a tax write-off, which is a nice thing to have as well. So I think that was the first important thing. Another really important thing was implementing some systems. So Graduate was a big opportunity to create a place for alumni to connect, for the university to gather some updated contact information, to even know who's in Miami to reach out to about a conference like this. So while that doesn't seem like a really big deal, we know that successful philanthropy requires systems in place, great leadership in place, and also working to develop a case for support document and identifying key areas of philanthropic need and opportunity. So as we were talking a little bit last night, there's some interesting things about weaving in maintaining and preserving what's been so fantastic about the history and legacy of the university, in addition to thinking about the future and that innovation and entrepreneurship and many of the themes that have come up today during our discussion and how those can be infused into the future of the university. And one big area is needing more people like you to be involved, to be partners, and to engage with Juan and with others across different areas. So we want to make sure we talk a little bit about that as well. Craig, I'd be interested to hear from you. What are some of the future visions that we could look at for Unimet, in addition to those themes? Okay, yeah. We would love planned giving for sure. But what are some other things that we could think about for the future?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of real obvious things, and it was interesting at dinner last night, without my prompting them, most of the people at my table sort of came to these ideas. So I guess they're that obvious that, we thought of them over dinner. But I do want to say kind of one other thing just to sort of stick a pin in all this and, off to the side. Philanthropy has been growing like crazy, right? So to that first trend I mentioned, larger gifts to fewer organizations, the number of donors has actually contracted a little bit, at a sort of big global level. But the amount of dollars donated has been rising year over year, year over year, year over year.
For example, year over year, Unimet increased fundraising by 111% in the past year, which is an amazing accomplishment.
That wasn't even a planned softball that I just threw Amanda, but that worked out. That worked out perfectly. So yeah, so that's an amazing example of that. But I wanted to just say sort of before I got into the future, because I wanted to mention it earlier and I forgot. The one sort of pin I would stick off to the side and just make sure we consider right now at the moment. For the first time in like say the last week and a half, 2 weeks, I've started to hear donors say, I'm not sure because of the market, because of the economy, because of inflation, because of the world we're living in. That's not uncommon for donors to do that. It'll usually lag, right? So the market's been sort of doing what it's been doing more or less since January, and you're just starting to hear that. So donors don't quickly turn, but they will start to turn a little bit. The good news is they bounce back pretty quick because they recognize that their giving is on a sort of multi-year trajectory. And on any multi-year trajectory, you're going to assume that the market is going to come back, right? So that's kind of going on in the background. Donors are wrestling that, so don't ignore that. But I think longer term, it's not really a concern for us. So again, the areas that I would think we really need to focus on, engaging our alumni, right? So we just haven't had conversations or connections with too many of the people that have come through the university. Now, the good news is every single person I've spoken to here, every single person we've spoken to throughout our engagement, great enthusiasm. I'll be honest with you, I work with universities that don't have connections with their alum, and then you talk to their alum and you find out why. Because they don't have very good experiences as students, right? Like they're not looking to have a connection. You don't really seem to have that problem. People do have a great affinity to the institution. So I think that fire is there. We just have to sort of fan it and rise it up. So I think alumni engagement is definitely one. Scholarships, right? You want to go out there to the market and be able to speak to donors about something they can understand, something that's tangible, and something that actually helps the university. Because, right, once you give scholarship money, it pretty much converts into tuition money pretty quick, which is then the funds that they use to do anything that they need to do at the university. And also the amazing sort of data point, cost to educate a student in Venezuela, cost to educate a student in college in the United States. I mean, that's a huge gap, right? So the thought to a philanthropist here in the US, particularly an alum, and it's like, hey, you could give to your business school and for, somebody told me 180 grand, for 2 years, how many students could you impact, in undergrad at Unimet, right? So I think that's a very powerful conversation for you to have. And then the other conversation, which I really think we can accelerate here with donors, is the idea of sort of centers at the university, right? Find those specialty areas that we can really drive quality education around, but that also donors will get excited about. So I think by the time we even got into the third glass of wine last night, they'd hatched a whole plan for an entrepreneurship center, right? So, I mean, I think these things can come together quite quickly. And then you can also engage your alumni, both as donors and as participants in these. So I think, while the last tee up about the 111% was on accident, this one will be much more transparent. So Amanda, how do you think people can help?
Oh, Craig, let's talk a little bit about that. So the fact that you're all here today is an indicator that you are interested and excited about what's going on. And so what's next? We've had some conversations already. When's the next one of these conferences? When's the next opportunity to get together with the real estate panel? Because I really want to talk more to them. Here's some ideas that we've developed and worked with Juan and Luis Miguel and the team. One area is to think more strategically about scholarships. We know that the university has been giving out increasingly more scholarships because of what's going on in the country, and now creating opportunities for alumni to sponsor a student for an entire 4 years. Using the US model for here's the student, you actually have a chance to talk to them, to meet them, and to support them through the entirety of their education at Unimet. So a 4-year scholarship. In addition to that, creating pooled scholarship funds. We know that many donors don't have the same motivation as US-based donors. They may not want their name on a building. They may not want their name on a scholarship. So creating some more private stewardship and giving opportunities, including, for example, a pooled fund, as we were talking about a bigger trend, create a Miami-based alumni scholarship fund or a rugby team scholarship fund that could then have smaller amounts of giving into a bigger pool that could be used to support many students. So those are some fundraising ideas that we think are very tactical. So if you are interested in supporting a scholarship, talk to either of us. Talk to Juan. He loves WhatsApp. He loves LinkedIn. You should be connected with him anyway. But in addition to fundraising, we know there's just a lot of opportunity to give value back to you as alumni in creating networking events like this. So creating alumni clubs, either regionally here in Miami, where there's such a strong base, or by interest. So maybe in addition to launching a center focused on entrepreneurialism, creating a club focused on entrepreneurialism, where it doesn't matter where you live or what stage in your career, but helping students network, helping young alumni network, helping them be connected to the senior level alumni who can help them get jobs and mentor them in what they're doing. I think that's a great area of opportunity. And join Graduate so that we have your contact information. Come to the next one of these conferences. I think I have gotten Juan to commit to doing it in Miami again, potentially Madrid, but join as a speaker, join as a sponsor. We'd love to talk to you more about that. Help us connect to the broader Venezuelan community here. If you know alumni who aren't here today, tell them how great this was. If you know of companies that are in the area who would benefit from the great exposure to this group, think about engaging them. We did a lot of outreach. We heard a lot of interest. And the fact that all of you are here in this room was very interesting. So we'd love to pursue that further and build that corporate engagement. And again, connect with the Unimet team. You know, Luis Miguel, Juan, Tomasita, you've all been amazing. The committee members have been incredible. So continue the networking there.
That's all we got. Thank you.